Hello everyone, welcome to the Jacksonville History Show. I'm Harry Reagan. On this show, an interview with one of Jacksonville's broadcasting pioneers, Herb Gold. Here's the interview.
I started off as a newspaper photographer. I majored in photojournalism in school, in college. I went into the Navy, was stationed in Jacksonville. Before I went into the Navy, television was in its infancy in the New York City area. But I could see what it was doing to the newspapers. I worked for a newspaper up there and saw what it was doing to the newspapers as far as advertising and as far as, even though it was only on maybe 4 hours a day, I thought this was going to be how news was delivered to the home.
Even though I guess in the early days it was more entertainment than news.
Oh yeah.
You could see the potential.
There was a 15-minute newscast, and that was it. And that was on at 6 o'clock, from 6 to 6:15. That was the national news.
And your original connection with Jacksonville was through the Navy.
The Navy, and I was going to be discharged in '55, early '55, and in '54 I decided I had to see about some interviews for television stations in Jacksonville. I went to Channel 36 was on the air at the time. Tom Gilchrist was the general manager. I had an interview with Tom. They weren't hiring. I had an interview with Harry Kalkinis, who you know. He was the production manager at Channel 4 at the time. And I walked into his office and we had an interview and they weren't hiring. At that time, 12 was not on the air. They had the license, they weren't even building. And Harold Cohen, who owned a radio station here in town, but he was also the news editor of the afternoon newspaper at one time. I think it was the Jacksonville Journal. And he was a part owner of the Channel 12 that was coming on the air. And somebody knew him and set up an interview for me, and I went over and talked to him, gave him my resume, and he told me that he wasn't doing the hiring, but Jess Kripe in Miami at WTVJ was going to be the general manager here, and he would send my resume to him. And I thanked him very much, and I was discharged from the Navy and went back up to New Jersey. But I kept writing letters.
So they said, don't call us, we'll call you.
Exactly. So I kept writing letters to Gilchrist, to Harry Kalkinis, to Jess Kripe, who was still in Miami. And it sort of dwindled down, so I knew that they were coming on the air. I wrote a letter a week to Jess Kripe, and I became pen pals with his secretary. And in '57, in August of '57, I was coming down here on vacation, and just before I was getting ready to leave Paterson, New Jersey, I got a call from Harold Baker. He wanted me to send him some copies of my work, some samples. And I said, well, I'll be down there next week. I'll bring it with me. And he kept saying, no, I don't want you to come down. I just want to see your work. I said, no, I'm coming down on vacation. I will bring my work with me. And I had a portfolio of still pictures since I was in still photography at the time. And I came down, I arrived on, let's see, on a Sunday. And I had a meeting with Harold Baker and Jess Kripe on Tuesday. Tuesday afternoon, they hired me. I flew back to New Jersey on Wednesday, put all my furniture in storage, came back, moved in with my in-laws, and started work the following Monday.
Wow.
And that was 2 weeks before they went on the air.
And one of the things that you had to address, I guess, was making a transition from still pictures to moving pictures.
Still to moving, yeah. The thing that I had going for me, I guess, was from my stint in the Navy. I learned motion picture part of photography, and also how to process motion pictures. And 12 had ordered and was about to receive a film processing machine that could turn out 1,000 feet of film at a time, and 1,000, 1,200 feet at a time, which was something new as far as television stations in Jacksonville was concerned. The only other machine like that was at a film company here in town, Russell Barton Film Company. They were the ones that had the machine. So that, since I knew something about that machine, that helped to get me the job. And it came in pieces, and we put it together, mixed some chemicals, went across the street. When I say across the street from the studio where we're shooting, there was a park at the time, and another person who had been hired by the name of Bob Henry, and he had some background as far as film was concerned, and we shot 100 feet of film, and we ran it through the processor, and lo and behold, we had moving pictures.
Now, the exciting thing about Channel 12 was color.
Yes. It was the first station in the country built for color from the ground up. There had already been stations on the air televising in black and white, and they'd convert to color. But 12 was the first station built for color. It was what was at that time called the turnkey operation. RCA came in after the bricks and mortar were in place. RCA came in and put all the equipment in, tested it, and set it up, and then handed the keys to the engineers that Channel 12 had.
What were the special problems about color?
Oh, air conditioning was one, because of the size of the transmitter and the equipment.
And more lighting?
The heat, more lighting was another thing. Color balance. The equipment was very, very sensitive at the time. And you know, we're talking about in 1957 as compared to now when you walk around with your cell phone and you take color film, digital.
And also, a very small point, not very many people had color TV sets.
No, very few. You had them in shop windows. People would see it there. Now, once they saw it, they thought it was wonderful. They thought it was absolutely tremendous, seeing color. In fact, one of the things that we did was, from time to time, we would take the cameras out and we would go to different locations so that people could see themselves in color. And you know, we had monitors set up. That helped to sell television sets, color television sets, and of course it helped to get us to get an audience.
How much more would a color set cost than a black and white?
Oh, at that time, I'd say maybe $1,000, $1,500 more. They were expensive. That's why very few people had them. And it was something new.
Yeah.
It was something new. But the fact that we were televising in color, and we didn't always televise in color. We had black and white cameras also. So we did do some in black and white. When we went on remote units, we took the remotes, we took the black and whites with us, or we took the color depending upon what it was going to be. One of the things that helped us along was the ownership of the station. It was owned, the majority ownership was Wometco, who owned WTVJ in Miami, and they had been on from, oh, I guess year one, the same as Channel 4 was here. And they owned the Miami market. So those people were knowledgeable, and that helped us as far as what to do. When we went on the air in '57, we had a full-blown news operation. We had a news department, not only the news director, but we had, oh, I'd say maybe 20 people that just worked in the news department. And that was from the get-go.
So September 1st, 1957, the station went on the air.
That's right.
And there was some, you gave me some notes that indicate that there were some tests before that day.
Oh, yeah. For 3 days before, we were at 7 o'clock in the evening, we were going to run a movie. And Rusty Bruton, who had come up from Miami, he worked at TVJ in Miami, and he was the program manager. He put together a quite elaborate opening for this movie. And unfortunately, I don't remember what the movie was at the time, but he was directing this opening, live opening in the studio with the announcer, and I remember there were dancing girls and everything else, and did the whole thing, and then went to roll the film, and the transmitter went off the air. And Rusty just got up and walked away, because there was nothing else he could do. Our people, when I say our people, our engineering department, once RCA turned the equipment over to them, had a lot to do, because they too, color television was new to them also. And they were working around the clock to get things going. And it got to the point that they were just wearing themselves out. And we did have engineers come up from TVJ in Miami to help, so that our guys could get some rest.
What they were learning, was TVJ in color?
TVJ had color equipment, but they were not on the air yet with color. Okay? But they knew as far as the equipment was concerned, and they had a tremendous engineering crew. So they sent engineers up and to spell our guys, our engineers, and then September 1st we went on the air, and we were off and running.
So despite those initial stumbles, color was a big deal.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. People knew about color television because there was a big discussion and a contest between CBS and NBC as far as the type of color equipment that would be used. And RCA, NBC won out as far as the FCC was concerned. So people were aware of color television, though it was something new. But then once we got on the air, and not only were we doing the NBC programming, we were doing local programming in color also.
And there must have been thinking on the part of producers and stations that how's this going to look in color? We want to have things that are really going to be colorful.
Absolutely. And here again, this was before tape, so everything was live. We would do live Winn-Dixie commercials where they would be cooking right in the studio. And I remember William Cook Agency had the Winn-Dixie account, and there was a lady by the name of Jocelyn Brown who worked for Bill Cook, and she would do the cooking, and she, she was an announcer. She could do the commercials, and she'd be cooking steaks. She'd be cooking, frying eggs, things of that kind. And you'd look at them and you wonder, well, is that the correct colors? And the engineers would have to tweak the cameras a little bit to make it look as if that's what was on the plate in front of you. We did talk shows. We invited guests in. If anybody was passing through town, any celebrity was passing through town, we had a live program they could be on. Sports figures, live program they could be on. We did live programming. Constantly, we did live programming. Early in the morning, late at night, middle of the day, live programming. And it was done in color.
And a lot of remote broadcasting.
We did a lot of remote broadcasting. One of the things that the nucleus of the people that put Channel 12 on the air, the nucleus were from WTVJ in Miami. They had worked there, and they were picked to put 12 on the air. They were used to doing remotes. The Orange Bowl, they took their equipment to Cuba. At that time, Cuba was open. They did a lot of different shows from Miami that the networks originated from Miami. So they were used to taking their equipment out and all the time. And when we went on the air, that carried forward. At the drop of a hat, our remote truck would be on the road.
And it's hard to overstate how big television was in the 50s and 60s. Before tape, you had to be there watching television if you wanted to see the show.
If you wanted to see it, yeah, it was live. There was no tape. It was live. And the next day people would talk, or at night, or the next day around the water cooler, they would talk about, did you see last night? Did you see this? Did you see that? Yeah, absolutely. The only time that it wasn't live, it was film. But the network shows were
Most
filmed.
of the commercials were live.
Most of the commercials were live. They started to do car commercials were filmed because they could go to exotic locations to do car commercials. But most of the commercials were done live. And here again, you kept going.
Yeah.
If there was a mistake,
inherent in live television is mistakes. And
right. You'd have rehearsals, and you'd do a rehearsal, and if there was something that wasn't right, the director would stop and say, "Everybody freeze," and everybody would stand still, and they'd say, or this would be over a PA system because he would not be in the studio, and he would say, "Harry, move 2 steps to your right," because you were in the shot. And you'd move 2 steps to your right. You said, "You draw a line on the floor or whatever. You don't step over that line, and let's try it again." And so that type of thing. But occasionally it would happen. Occasionally somebody would walk across the background who was not supposed to be part of the commercial or the show.
So a lot of local entertainment, sports.
Yes, a lot of sports.
Not to mention, you mentioned news, which was an increasingly important part of TV stations. But talk about local entertainment shows.
Entertainment shows, we had the Glenn Reeves Show. Toby Dowdy was on Channel 4 for a long time. Glenn Reeves was on Channel 4 for a while, came over to 12, and was on 12 through William Cook Agency.
And I have to mention my classmate, Johnny Tillotson.
Johnny Tillotson was another one. I can remember Johnny coming in because Johnny, as you know, went to University of Florida, journalism.
Right.
Okay. And at the time, journalism was not television.
Right.
It was news media, right? It was newspaper, It was photography. And I can remember Johnny, at that time I was a photographer, and I had the photo lab, and I can remember Johnny coming in after the show, that, can I use your lab to do my schoolwork? And he would do the schoolwork, and then he'd go back to Gainesville.
That's a great story.
Johnny Downey was a great guy, great guy.
And apparently still performing in Europe? And
He's still performing. At the time when he left, when I say when he left Jacksonville, when MGM picked him up, he was the #1 performer in Europe. He was scheduled to take, as you know, Pat Boone was another one from, another person from Jacksonville. And MGM had a stable of performers, and when one started to wane, they'd bring another one up. And Johnny Tillotson was in that line to be moved up. And he still, today he still does concerts.
And a lot of sports, high school football.
High school football. We were right around the corner from the Gator Bowl. Walt Dunbar had been hired from, he came down from Massachusetts.
For many, many years.
Yes, he was the sports director, and he came down from Massachusetts. He was a radio guy in Massachusetts, and he came down, and somehow he and I just had the right mixture, the right magic. And what we would do is we would go over on Friday nights at the Gator Bowl was high school night, and we would go over and shoot 50 feet, 75 feet of film, and edit in the camera. And when I say edit in the camera, you'd shoot a play and then turn around and shoot the bench, and then shoot another play. So you didn't have to actually edit when you got back to the station. And we'd get back to the station at about, maybe 10 o'clock for 11 o'clock news show, and we were able to process the film and put it on the air. Well, it got to be that the high school coaches would keep the teams at the Gator Bowl, and they'd bring a little black and white television set with them so that the teams could see themselves on the 11 o'clock news.
Again, how dominant television was.
Absolutely, absolutely. We did that to, basically it was selfish. We wanted to naturally build an audience. When we came on the air, when 12 came on the air, the television landscape in Jacksonville was Channel 4. That was the landscape. And we...
They had a head start.
Yes, a big head start. Just as, TVJ, WFLA in Tampa, they were, 3 stations in Florida that were on the air. So we had to climb up that ladder. As an NBC affiliate, we had the AFL football. Well, when I came to Jacksonville, I guess when you did also, it was the Washington Redskins. That if you wanted to see NFL football, you saw the Washington Redskins. That was it. So when we came on the air, NBC had the AFL, so we were showing the AFL games. So that was a change also. Those were the things that helped us to climb up that ladder and build that audience.
You're watching the Jacksonville History Show, an interview with Herb Gold, one of Jacksonville's broadcasting pioneers. More of our interview after this.